All right, Leo's working on his video.
All right, we're going to get started here.
Yep,
because
please do.
Catch up here. We are a little behind, but so moving right along to the second packed fast track session. So sharpen your pencils and let's take some notes. And now we're going to move on to our first speaker, Leo Moorman. He gives talks and courses on radon-related topics, is former ARS board member and president of Radon Home Measurement and Mitigation in Colorado. So Dr. Moorman, if you are...
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Yeah, okay, I think it's coming. Hold on. Can
There
you see me now? There, okay.
Excellent. So you've got about 10 minutes and we'll catch back up with you in a minute. Go ahead, Leo. You're up.
Oh, okay. So I do share screen here. Share.
Yes, sir.
Okay, it's coming up, I think.
That was my fault, sorry.
Do you see?
We see just the regular Uva screen. Go ahead and try sharing again, Dr. Moorman.
I think I got it. Hold on a second. Okay, do you see me now?
No.
No, not yet.
No.
When you go to share screen,
Yeah.
there's two little buttons. Are you doing slides?
Slides, yes.
Oh, okay, never mind. This is for a video.
So that share screen, I see the share your screen. Okay.
Yeah, you click the green button and then you have to select from your options which screen to share, and then you have to hit share screen again.
I got it. Yeah. Thank you. I needed that little help, I think.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. All right, slideshow starting from the beginning here. So I'm going to talk, I'm Leo Moorman, Radon Home Measurement Mitigation. I've been a mitigator for about 22 years and testing company here in Fort Collins in Colorado. I'm going to talk about a positive metric for the success of mitigation efforts from the point of view of a small company that has been worked 2 decades on saving lives. And the saving lives factor has been very important to me because when we originally went into city council to require radon mitigation, passive radon mitigations in new home construction to be installed, there was somebody, a professor, drove hundreds of miles and said, not even one lung cancer person is saved or prevented by the efforts done in this town. This rubbed me the wrong way, so I did calculations at that time. In 2003, I wrote a little paper and gave it at the ARS meeting. And basically, this is an extension of that. What I can tell you now, that how many lives I have saved with my little company. This is a reminder, the slide is a reminder of the 21,000 lung cancers that are estimated to occur from radon every year in the United States. And everybody on this group will remember that. This is a reminder of how an exterior radon system should look like to go above the roof, and a fan installation. In new home construction, you see it may be a little bit more difficult to install. This is a house in the mountains of Colorado. And yes, that's me there up in between the roofs. Just a reminder what radon installation is. How do we calculate, or how do we estimate, and that is do a calculation so that we find an estimate for the number of lung cancer saved when we have a radon level of R1 that we measure first in a house, and after mitigation we have a radon level of R2 in picocurie per liters. and we look at how many people live in the house, divide that by 1.25 picocurie per liter, which is the average in the United States. We can do this estimate and multiply it with a factor that is the EPA factor. I show here the EPA factor that was valid from 1992, 0.000224 lung cancers per working level month. And I've multiplied that with the 21,800 over 14,000 people that are, the 21,800 is the new estimate for the number of death in the United States per year, as opposed to the old factor that was 14,000 people. And multiply that with 0.242, which really is the working level month per year. It's the cumulative exposure to RDPs in 1 year, equivalent to an exposure of the 1.25. The 1.25 you see here in the denominator. And that would be per year. And so I've calculated that per decade here by multiplying this with a factor 10. This is basically as simple as this is the formula to come down to how many lung cancer deaths per decade I save by doing a mitigation. And this on the y-axis is the formula I just showed. That's where all the science goes in. On the x-axis is the number of houses, and these are the first 275 houses in about 2.5 years I mitigated. And for each house, I have a value before and a value after, and the difference between the two represents basically a lung cancer death per decade. Basically, this is about 2 years, but now I've worked some 22 years, and that little triangle that you saw there is really represented by this first little triangle section. After 22 years, can we calculate how many lung cancer? Let me go back 1 second. The difference at the right side here is basically 7 minus 1 per decade. That means 0.6 per decade, so 0.6 per year, or so 0.6 per year after 275 houses. 0.6 lung cancers saved per year after 275 houses. Can we now calculate in 2020 how much this number is, this rate at which we are saving lives? Yeah, we can, because we could multiply the 0.6 lung cancers saved per year by the number of houses that I just showed, is 275 houses, and I'm doing about 125 houses per year times 22 years. That gives me, I'm now at a rate of 6 lung cancers saved per year. So go back to the big triangle. That is now 6 lung cancers saved per year, and I've done that over 22 years. Now I can calculate the area of this triangle. That's a half times 22 times 6. And that's the total numbers of lung cancers represented by this triangle. So it comes down to 66. A half times 22 times 6 is 11 times 6 is 66 lung cancers saved. So it is well with my little company, 1 person plus a help. It is well above the 1 lung cancer saved over the 22 years. And actually, if you do 66 divided by 22 years, that's 3 lung cancers per year. Although right now I'm at a rate of 6 lung cancers saved per year. So I could do another little calculation and say, how long before this small company reaches the milestone of 100 lung cancers saved? Let me point out one other thing in the calculation here. When you in series apply this calculation, you see in the red that I used the 22 years twice. So the formula goes for the total lung cancer saved goes up quadratically in the time that I'm in business. The blue represents how hard I work per year, and the 0.6 represents basically something about how much radon is there in the area. So if you look at that. So here you have that quadratic formula, half y squared times all these factors that I taught before needs to be 100. It comes down to the numbers of years. It's the square root of 733, which is 27 years. I've already worked 22 years. So in another 5 years, I have basically reached 100 lives saved from lung cancer. I find that very impressive, and I find the fact that this goes squared in the number of duration that I'm in business very encouraging, that it is going up so fast. Other positive metrics that you can derive from this is the economic burden on the area due to the lung cancer that is eliminated. And if you think of a guideline here of $60,000 per lung cancer saved, then you can see that times 100, this is 6 million in this little area just by my company alone. Not even the other companies in my area that exist. In addition, of course, there is the the burden on the people. I mean, the families that are all affected by it. But this is a metric that one can actually look at dollars that are involved here. Saving lives only continues as long as the manometer on the vent pipes are checked and regular follow-up testing is performed. So I wanted to make that point. That quadratic formula only exists if these systems keep running all over time. That's why the systems that were done 10 years ago still save lives now. And so test needs to be done and manometers need to work good. Something is not working right, you get these phone calls, there are all kinds of failures and people need to follow up. So in conclusion, a small company can make a significant impact on the area by the number of lung cancers prevented in occupants of homes they mitigate. At a constant rate of yearly mitigations, a company's lung cancers saved will increase as the square of the number of years in business. With 5 years more in business, this small company will reach 100 lung cancers saved. I open it up for questions.
Leo, we're going to save our questions to the end. We're on a pretty tight schedule. We'll do all the questions for all three.
Sure. Yep.
So next we're going to move into Mr. Bill Brodhead, who is the president at WPB, sorry, Bill, Enterprises. Bill has been installing radon and vapor intrusion systems in residential, commercial, and school buildings since 1984. He's also been the radon mitigation instructor at Rutgers University for 25 years. So Leo, if you can stop sharing your screen, we'll give the controls to Bill. Mr. Brodhead, are you?
I'm there.
There we go. Now we can hear you.
And can you see the slide?
We can.
You can see it?
We sure can. Perfect.
Okay. All right. Well, I need to go through because I have a lot of information here for a very short amount of time. But basically what I'm after is to show you what happens if you exhaust a radon system at grade. How does the radon diffuse, and what is the possibility of it coming back into the house, and therefore determining whether we need to route the exhaust up to the roof. So in this talk, it originates because the Canadians and the Europeans have said, hey, exhaust at grade is okay. So we've known about that for quite a while, for a number of years. And when I reviewed that and tried to find out research, I found that there was very, very little research on exhaust at grade done in the United States over the last 25 years. So what I proposed to do then was to study a single system, which happened to be my own house, using a variable speed fan and exhausting my system at grade. In order to replicate multiple systems, I decided it would be best if I could vary the exhaust speed 20 to 40 to 69 CFM and vary the outlet size to 3 to 4 inch to kind of replicate what it would be in other houses that had higher airflows, lower airflows. A research project going on now has been using alpha tracks and grab samples, but I decided that there was the only way to really accurately measure is to have continuous radon monitors. And so we placed monitors on every level of the house. And I also needed to know what the ambient was. So we placed a monitor in the backyard. And at the same time, we put 8 continuous CRMs around the ASD exhaust that was being exhausted from the house. So we also needed to know what the radon was in the exhaust, because obviously that's an influencing factor. But the big factor when you look at grade level is wind. So we had a weather data, which we set up a weather station at grade near the exhaust point and at the roof. And then we ran it for at least 3 to 8 days with each one of these sequences. And reviewing the literature, I was trying to determine, well, where did this come from of exhausting up to the roof? And it all pointed to a Pennsylvania study of 38 homes, of which 27 of them had ASD systems. Half of them had reentrainment. When I reviewed the research that was done back in 1985, 80 to 86, 87, I found that the original systems were set up with a flaw where they exhausted the ASD systems directly against the building siding. There's a lot of reentrainment that took place, as mentioned. And so in 1989-90, the EPA went back in and had Arthur Scott was chief person and Bruce Henschel revise those systems to exhaust directly away from the house and above the roof. When I dug deeper into the technical guidance, which was published at the same time that the EPA requirement was published, stating that we had to go to the roof, I found this statement in the technical guidance written by Bruce Henschel. The very limited data which are available directly comparing above eave and grade level exhaust suggests that grade level exhaust directed horizontally to grade, not against the siding, and aimed 90 degrees away from the house can result in reentrainment no more severe than the experience when the exhaust is discharged vertically above the eave. So I was like, wow, even back then they realized that direct discharging at grade could work. So we set up this particular system where it was exhausting at grade in 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters, and 4 meters directly in the line of the exhaust were continuous radon monitors. Then at a 45-degree angle, we had 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters at a 45 with continuous radon monitors. And we had one directly beside, only a ½ meter away, as well as radon monitors in the house. At the same time, we also measured the outdoor ambient level. So I collected over 10,000 measurements, running these for 6 weeks under these varying conditions of different exhaust levels. One of the interesting points that came up was for this particular system, the radon in the exhaust never varied dramatically. And here we are, 232 picocuries, changing very little when we shifted the exhaust to different velocities. And we also found that our exhaust included quite a bit of thoron, so we had to exclude the thoron using a method to reduce transmission into the detector heads. This is the setup. So the CRMs are placed inside Tyvek bags. The weather station is right here. We have 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters, 4 meters going out, and then we have 45 degrees. And then this is the monitor that was set next to the exhaust. During this time, my neighbor approached and said, "What the hell are you doing?" and had to explain to him what I was going through. As one setup during the standard, I decided it would be good to see, can I try and cause radon to come into the house? So we left the window open for 5 days. And during that 5-day period, the radon level at the window with the exhaust directly below it did not vary at all from the radon levels in the remaining part of the house. And this is the graph of that period when the window was open. Now, this particular graph has no measurements of directly in line. These are house measurements. But the reason I wanted to show it was the red is the window measurement, and you'll see the radon levels going up and down only to a level of about 2 picocuries, okay? However, notice that the green, which represents the radon monitor in the backyard, was also going up at the same time. The dashed lines represent wind speed, and when the wind would go to almost 0 at night, the radon levels outdoors would climb to over 2 picocuries in this case. and the red, the indoor, would also climb at the same time. And a radon monitor on the 3rd floor would also climb. And so when radon levels are climbing up to 2 picocuries outside, the entire house, 1st floor, 2nd floor, 3rd floor, climb with it. In other words, outdoor radon levels completely fill the atmosphere surrounding a house, and the radon levels indoors track with a slight delay. As it falls off outdoors, it takes a little longer for it to fall off on the indoor levels there. So this just shows you that, hey, we definitely get increasing radon when radon levels outdoors go up. Now, in direct line with the exhaust pipe, we saw significant spikes. And in this case, the exhaust, once again, is about 234 picocuries. This is a low-speed exhaust, 20 CFM. And we're getting 40 CFM, we're getting 40 picocuries climb, once again, when the wind is really low. Okay, and so we're seeing these spikes every time the wind decreases, we get spikes, and when the wind is blowing, then the radon levels decrease, sometimes to as little as 5 picocuries versus the 40 picocuries as soon as wind. So wind is the predominating factor. Now at a 45-degree angle from the exhaust, which is this orange line, we also see some increasing radon, however, not near what the direct line is. And what's interesting is that the 45 degrees actually starts replicating more at a higher level when the wind is blowing, which tends to say that there's radon coming out of the exhaust and the wind is pushing it over towards the 45. Now, most important for this study is what's happening next to the siding of the house. And this blue line represents the radon concentration at the siding, 1/2 meter away from the exhaust port, in direct line with the exhaust. And it was averaging about 1/2 picocurie above ambient. So literally next to the house, when this radon's being discharged, there's very little radon there's very little increase in radon. And keep in mind that even if there was increased radon next to the exhaust pipe, we're only measuring within the short distance of the pipe itself. The entire perimeter of the house, of course, would be at ambient levels. So when we went and then calculated the average at the different air speeds, we found that at 1 meter, sure enough, radon levels could go from anywhere from 6 to 25% of there. So, so that shows that, yes, we can definitely have high, but at 1/2 meter, almost nothing. And 1/2 meter is literally 0.3, or not half, excuse me, about 0.1 to 0.2, and 1/2 meter away is just the slightest amount of radon. So once again, hardly any radon next to the exhaust. And radon typically in exhaust pipes, this is some early research that people can look at later that shows that most exhaust systems are under 300 picocuries, and actually a highly predominant quantity of them were less than 1,000 picocuries in one previous study. So the conclusions are EPA research said that you could, as long as you directed the exhaust away from the house, would not cause reentrainment. No wind periods will cause indoor levels to rise all the way up to the 3rd floor. Direct exhausting had no significant radon accumulation around the exhaust. 1 meter in front of the exhaust can see levels as high as 10 to 25% of the exhaust concentration. Radon levels are close to ambient at 4 meters, which is 12 feet away. And at 45 degrees, the exhaust there is averaging only 1 or 2% of the exhaust concentration, with higher spikes depending on the wind direction. So these slides will be available if people want to refer to them later.
Great, thank you, Bill.
Crystal, I'll let you take over.
I appreciate that, thank you. Okay, now we are on to our last part of this section. Lesley Herrmann, who has a background in physics, civil engineering, and holistic nutrition. She has worked as a research engineer in the commercial building team in the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden, Colorado, and now serves as the indoor air quality specialist at E3 Innovate. Ms. Herrmann's presentation will be about 10 minutes, and we'll hold the questions till the end for all 3 of you. Thank you.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
We sure can.
Okay, great. I'm going to try and share my screen here. Let's do this. All right, can you see that?
We sure can. You're good to go.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for being here, and it's a privilege to be speaking with these other folks, these other speakers. So far in my session had very interesting things to share, so I hope I can add to that. So I'm going to be talking today a little bit about our company, but mostly about how we use ventilation in homes to help address radon and use it in tandem with other mitigation systems. And I'll share a case study as well. A little bit about.
Excuse me, Lesley.
Yeah.
It looks like you have a computer visual pop-up in your screen. Thank you.
Okay, got it. Perfect. So a little bit about E3 very quickly. We are a whole home performance company based in Nashville, Tennessee. Nashville is in a class 1 radon zone as well as a lot of the surrounding areas. So a lot of our calls are radon dependent. It may not be the prompt for our clients to call us, but it's oftentimes involved in our assessments, our diagnostics, and then our solutions. So we as a company always go out to a house and diagnose it first. You might call it an energy audit, but we're more focused on whatever the primary concern is for that homeowner. We do blower door testing, we do duct blaster testing, as well as radon testing in every single assessment that we do to make sure that we're understanding the whole house as it performs as a system. And whether we're recommending a sealed crawl space, attic insulation, or a radon mitigation system, we feel that we need to understand how the house performs as a whole, both before any work is done and after also, to make sure that things stay in balance. So we'll move on here. That's a little bit about us. So just really briefly, some of the things that we take into consideration, of course, we're dealing every day with building codes in new homes and existing homes. Most of the work we do is in existing homes. But I wanted to bring up a very interesting point in the changes in codes as we move from 2009 primarily over to 2018. The major difference that we found occurring in 2012 was that blower doors became mandatory and whole house ventilation also became mandatory. And as we move forward with the different air change rate requirements, we see that in 2012, in most of the climate zones in the US, there are 3 through 8, we see that the air tightness of a house, now again, this is measured with a blower door test, the air tightness relates to how much infiltration that you have moving in and out of the house in a natural way. So when we measure this, this performance pre-occupancy of new construction, we have now set a requirement that all homes must meet 3 air changes per hour there for the climate zones 3 through 8. Whereas before it was a 7 air changes. So that's a big drop. The house is now tightening up and doesn't have as much natural ventilation. This is a really good thing in the South because with the infiltration also comes moisture. And that's a major concern for us in terms of indoor air quality and also radon being in a class 1 radon zone. So we have this very unique mix of moisture management, the need for moisture management, lots of new construction happening, and we're in a class 1 radon zone. So we have to be very cautious of that. Now, the mechanical ventilation actually becomes a requirement when air changes are at 5 ACH or less. So until recently, just recently, most of Nashville and the surrounding area counties had amended our air changes up to the 2009 level. So we're building codes supposedly to higher standards, but they've made amendments that actually make it perform not as well. So we've amended back to 2007, or excuse me, 2009 to a 7 ACH. But what's occurring is that we're overlooking the need for mechanical ventilation. So we have a huge problem here. Our houses are getting tighter, and which is causing more radon issues, more moisture issues, and we're not providing the proper mechanical ventilation. So in new construction, yes, we do put in passive radon systems, but no one does a follow-up test. So the homeowner moves in, after the house is finally built, the homeowner is in. No one is educating them on, hey, you need to test now your radon levels after the house is built and you're moved in. It's been a year or so. And what we're finding is these houses are being built very tight, some down in the two air change rate per hours, and they don't have the proper mechanical ventilation, and they have high radon levels, or they have moisture problems or VOC issues. It's not just radon, but it's an overall indoor air quality problem with a lot of times radon showing up. So this is a case study. This was actually a house built in the 1950s, so it is an existing home, but they have added about 1,000 extra square feet. And radon levels in the crawl space were at 64 picocuries, in the living space was 14. So very quickly here, this is just a diagram of the radon mitigation system that we installed. Big picture here, the black curvy line is the perforated piping, and the red straight lines are the PVC pipes that connect. And on this home, we had to add 2 radon fans. One is an RN4, which has the DC motor on it, so we can adjust the fan speed. And the other is a HP22 on the opposite side of the house. In addition to these 2 radon fans, we also used the active ventilation monitor called a radostat. And what this is doing is it's monitoring radon continuously and actually ramping up the mechanical ventilation that's in this home. This home uses an ERV, which is an energy recovery ventilator. So we are exhausting air from the indoors. At the same time, we're bringing in fresh air from the outside, passing over a heat exchanger. And this sensor will turn on the ERV at max capacity every time that radon levels are at 4 picocuries. So as it's trending upwards, it hits that 4 picocurie mark and it ramps up the ERV. So in this really brief data right here, I want to wrap up here pretty quickly. What we see are the initial readings on the left-hand side at about 14.5 or 6 picocuries. This shows the results. The green is a long-term test that we did over quite a few months, almost a year. Our readings were on average below the 4 picocurie mark. And in the blue, what we see is, and now again, this is an average over a time span. So these peaks and troughs are going to be higher and lower than what the line, the teal line shows. But right where the circle is, we turned off the ERV completely altogether. And obviously the average radon result in that time period increased. So even with the 2 radon fans, we still didn't have enough suction on the home to create that enough suction from underneath the house. So mechanical ventilation was extremely important in this tight house for mitigating radon and keeping it below the threshold. Here are just a few photos of what we did. We used gate valves, which helped in the balancing of the system. And there's the radostat on the wall next to the ERV controller. Key takeaways were you have to pay attention to radon levels, yes, but you also have to pay attention to the air leakage of the house, duct leakage, heating and cooling systems to make sure we can monitor and evaluate the capacity to dehumidify. And ventilation and dehumidification strategies are also important as we look at the entire home as a system. Here's our integrated approach, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Lesley. So now we're going to we have about 5 minutes for some questions. Jane or Amy, do we have any that showed up in our chat?
I have one, and it's for Bill, and it says, it's from Kevin Stewart. Thank you for looking at the original study and what it actually said, and then for doing the quote, looking and seeing, unquote, necessary to help understand what's going on. Question, what's your house's subslab concentration, and how much might those super high houses you've worked on do with EAG?
Well, the concentrations under your building would be almost the same, would be the same concentration as in the exhaust when the system's running. When the system's turned off, then concentrations obviously build up. So I can't tell you what they are with the system off. However, in our super high houses, we didn't do a lot of grab sampling, but we did do some. And in one of the houses, it was one of the highest concentrations measured. We had levels of 6,000 picocuries in the exhaust. Even in that case, the concentration at the exhaust, if we vent it out, would be minimal on the side. There obviously a plume can build up if you trace it. So there has to be some regulation on how at grade exhaust would be done. Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions, Jane or Amy? Amy.
And there's one from Nate, but I'm not sure who it's to.
Yeah, actually, that was, I put a note in there to asking state radon programs who are with us who could answer this question. It really was directed at state radon programs, and it was part of the previous panel. He was asking, what are the state radon programs considering in terms of assessment or QC check on RNC systems installed by builders and subcontractors, since many are being installed incorrectly without quality control or evaluation. But by the time that question got into the correct queue, we were out of time. And so now it's showing up for this session. I don't think we've got anybody on the panel who can answer that.
Let's save that and answer that on the Whova main chat. Okay, any other questions for Lesley, Bill, or Leo? Okay. Well, thank you, all three of you, for your wonderful presentations. Now we are moving right along. We have a sponsomercial. A word from our gold sponsor, Festa Radon Technologies, would like to acknowledge our radon mitigation professionals who are the backbone of our industry and have the support and admiration. Their passion, along with our fans, save lives. And now we are moving right along in this session. And I believe, Nicole, we are in this session as well, right? We don't need to switch, or do we need to switch to Houses from Heck into another session?
Sorry, you need to move in to Houses from Heck. So go back to the agenda and move on.
Session, go to your agenda and click on Houses from Heck, view session. And we will see you there in just a minute.